low salaries, and low blood pressure. And this time, when others are sitting on their bottoms, enjoying, oppressing, stealing, killing, and suffering from high salaries, high tax robberies, high expenditures, high profit, and high blood pressure. And this time, when music is abused by the people in power, controllers who control the media, which then dictate what good music is. And this time, when corrupt leaders lead music to the wrong path, using it to grab power, popularity, and stuff, scaring people, using music to tear down, while the purpose of music is to heal the broken souls, unify and uplift people. Oh, today is my day. Oh, na, 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 na. Thank you.
One more performance later. Thank you so much. A round of applause for him.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for them again. I see now our sugar levels are okay. So we can kickstart our panel discussion. That is the beauty of this country. So other than our noisy politics and politicians. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, is a panel session that will also have an engagement with you members of the plenary. There will be the roving microphone. Shipeta will help me and the team members so that you can also contribute to this session. I call on to the stage the 4 panel members. Dr. Joseph Kobler, human rights reporters from Ghana. Karibu. We also have Okechukwu Wanguma, who is with us. Karibu. Welcome. Welcome to Kenya. We also have Happy Olal, Social Justice Working Group, Kenya. I think he was the best of dancers. You come from Luyaland. Maintaining that rhythm is so unique. But Karibu, asante. Lovely having you. Muleta Kapatiso, who is a lawyer and an activist from Zambia. So the panel session, you can help me get this microphone to the audience? Yeah, we can get one. I'm adding one deliberately. You know, our parliament as it stands now is unconstitutional because of failing to meet the gender threshold. So I invoke the powers vested in me, which is a veto power in this case, of course with the permission of Mr. Yusuf and his team, that this panel be joined by Ruth Kangwa. You know, Ruth, we live in a country and other representatives from other parts of the continent that is so emboldened. Kenya is a citizenry that is so emboldened that we nearly chased our president out of town in 2024. Thank you. So this will revolve around the thematic areas that were presented here. Especially there was a very pertinent point made by the good lady Fayel from Tunisia that we must be heard by our governments. And in the Kenyan context, ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution of Kenya invests and vests power in the Kenyan people under Article 1, where all sovereign power belongs to the people of the Republic of Kenya. Security must be a right, based on right and accountable. Africa's future will not be built on fear, but on freedom and justice. Also, the delivery by Bwana Eric Mukoya, the Executive Director, ICJ, who had talked about the state of human rights, which he said is not monolithic, the trust deficit in our law enforcement agencies, which is a common phenomenon across the continent, the commercialization of justice, extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances, which is now a common again phenomenon across the continent, professionalization of our police service, the rule of law and constitutionalism, privacy laws, the laws of terrorism, and how they have been abused. As such, many scholars today term it as a self-fulfilling prophecy by many African leaders who want to hang on to power. And Uganda is a classical case with Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. And Tunisia has a place in history because some 11 years ago, that is where the Arab Spring kick started with Mohamed Bouazizi, and the first casualty was Zainabidine Ben Ali, which swept across Northern Africa. And so we discussed those areas, the fear that should not build the African societies, trust between the people and the state, the restoration of dignity, heal, not harm, as Ruth had said, and the quote that she did from Chinua Achebe's book. So once I take the first round of introduction and their first responses, I also equally expect you to contribute so that we make it a two-way communication where we also hear from you. It's symbiosis. It's giving or sharing experiences from best practices across the continent. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. No need for identification. Is this comfortable, the mic, where you are? So you can push the... I need an extra microphone here. You still have another one? Kuna nyingine? Okay. Baki na hiyo. Hiyo ni our plenary. Yeah, so that one amongst you can share the three, and the two gentlemen, you have your gadgets, so the three of you can share this. Actually, you two can share this, so that mimi ndo mtoko mkono usijali. Yeah. So this is flexible. I think my people are set now. Thank you. So in summary, I begin with you, Daktari. Is the direction, given what we had talked about here, the presentations and in summary, is the direction of travel right across the continent when it comes to governance? Direction of travel right. Are we traveling in the right direction across the continent as far as governance is concerned, as far as rule of law is concerned, as far as constitutionalism is concerned, and as far as human rights is concerned? So you can just pull it up, yes? Come near.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, yeah. So it is interesting to know that Africa as a continent, has come under such a pressure as far as the civic space, the shrinking of the civic space is concerned. And if you ask me if we are traveling or moving in the right direction as far as the rule of law and all that are concerned, I would say no, because of the way we are heading. The kind of experiences that we are having as a continent shows that we are not moving in the right direction. Why am I saying that? If you look at 54 African countries and you look at the kind of human rights violations that has erupted based upon, let's just take the rule of law. We have governments who are ruling, but I think our leaders, I must say that our leaders have failed us because we expect so much from them, but what actually they are interested in is to rule, to have power and to control people. They are not thinking about the health, they are not thinking about the well-being, they are not thinking about the rights of the citizens or the people they seek to rule. They seem to be power drunk in everything that they do. I'm saying this, let me pick one particular family that has, in Africa, that has ruled, that has hijacked a whole nation for 58 years. As if that was not enough, he died. His son took over for another 10 years. He still continues. And as we speak right now, there's a constitutional reform which has placed him in a position where he will be ruling indefinitely. So the rule of law, there's a question mark somewhere. So at the end of the day, the people suffer. And a lot of people's lives, they face torture, they face tyranny, they face brutality, it's unheard of. It cannot be spoken of because we are not going the direction we should be going.
Yeah.
If we should go the direction that we need to go, it means we have to prioritize human rights, dignity, justice, and peace. We have to prioritize what? Dignity, justice, transparency, not state control. Not state control, because it looks like they're only interested in controlling us, ruling over us. They don't care about our welfare. Absolutely, I disagree with you that we are going in the right direction. We are going off target or off tangent. Let me put it that way.
Okay, Chuku. The rule of law describes certainly an architecture where power is drawn from the people, but it's not to trample upon them, but to govern them as the constitutions dictate. Is that the reality in Africa? And do you agree with Dr. Kobler?
Well, this is the first time I'm speaking today, so let me first of all thank Africa for organizing this timely meeting and for this opportunity. And let me also thank my brother, Alex Kim, who spoke up for women. I'm one of those who say I will not be in a panel where women are excluded. So I'm happy that part of the challenge of democracy is exclusion.
Correct.
There is democratic decision across Africa. And if you listen to all those who have spoken, you see that there is a consensus around the state of democracy in Africa. Accountability ought to be the backbone of governance. Accountability is lacking. Rule of law ought to protect democracy, but rule of law is lacking across Africa. And when you find that in many African countries there are protests here, and in Kenya, protests, in Nigeria, protests, and what is the response of the states? Repression. So democracy has moved away from its original definition as a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now it is about the interest of those in power. And that is why elections no longer provide opportunity for citizens to hold their leaders to account. Because elections no longer count across Africa. And I think that is a major challenge to democracy. When people cannot, when the will of the people does not prevail, when people come to public office not by the will of the people, but through sheer force and electoral malpractice. So you find that we have a lot of work cut out for us. When people cannot feel safe and secure, when people exist devoid of fear of crime and devoid of fear for those who ought to protect them. You see, when security without human rights is state terrorism. Human rights without security is fragile. And so without accountability, without the rule of law, without human security, democracy is challenged.
Okay. Ruth, you talked about restoring dignity in your presentation. How so, and how can we achieve that in the context of education, healthcare, infrastructure development, and an emboldened citizenry who can stand up for their rights?
Thank you very much, moderator, for that. And because you caught me on gunshot to get up on this panel, I think the first thing I'll speak of, even before we get into the social economic development of Africa, is to look at how many of us Africans feel that we are politically independent, right? From the liberation movements, from gaining independence. But what we've seen is that we're institutionally captured to the extent that even the issues of how our African healthcare system looks like, our education system looks like, there is still institutional capture that is deeply rooted in more of stagnant reforms, but as well as a lot of frustrations that stem out from what people will say are performative elections. Even if you elect leaders that you believe are going to deliver quality health care, free education that they talk about, but that is not quality. And this is a pointer where I say that in the sense of African direction that we have taken, we acknowledge the strides of where we've gotten to, but I don't think we have made the attempt enough to get to a point where we unlock ourselves out of the third world culture or the least developed countries on the African continent. And in really looking at development and encouraging to see bolder development, one of the key things I'll start off and looking at, I think that I always base it on, is you do see that in our African countries, some of our constitutional courts are standing firm, civic actors are are, yes, using the law, right, to challenge abuses or to hold accountability for service delivery. And I'd want to believe that these gains, indeed, we look at them, but then we look at the dual reality forces that ask us that are we being handed these things at an extra expense? I'll give you a practical example where yesterday we took a ride on the Kenyan roads, right? And we were comparing and looking at the comparison of how the roads are very different. They're improved. These are the results of PPPs, right? But then you ask yourself, as Africans, if we do have a reality check, in the essence of bargaining for better education, better healthcare, more medication being brought, what is the greater expense of the African citizen at the end of the day? Where will we get to a point as Africans where even these PPPs that are being financed are actually by Africans themselves, African corporations coming together, as opposed to finding ourselves in the bracket of, and I say a different form of jacket of neocolonialism or imperialism, right? And for us to get to a bolder stage, we must really critically go back to the point where we do audit checks on how functional our state institutions operate that should bring socio-economic development to the people. We spoke about a critical issue, especially with regards to gender equality. Yeah. And I have said that gender equality without the rule of law already defeats the purpose of having the total population, which may constitute of women, of youth, being at the center stage of decision making. And for that is where I then say, and answering your first question, of the direction we've taken as Africa. Are we making progress or we're making 10 steps backwards? But we need to get to a point of realization where we must really critically check how strong our institutions any political insurgencies or political transitions, because we are in a state of political capture.
Yeah, okay. Muleta, what's the remedy or what are the remedial measures to the political capture as described by Ruth and the glaring inefficiencies in terms of governance across the continent, which seem to be cross-cutting?
I think the remedy is people power, because even at the very initial setup of the laws, that govern whether it's data protection, the cyberspace, rule of law, governance, elections, people power is left out. And then people power manifests itself as a voice of the unheard on the streets. So at the very formation of the architecture of our laws, of our policies, we must ensure that the very people these laws intend to affect are involved. We have, for example, back home, a situation where there is a constitutional amendment attempt, and our constitutional court have reverted back the executive an ideal situation of checks and balances and said, the spirit of the Constitution desires that you do broad-based consultation before you come up with an initial document that is subject to debate.
Here we have a broad-based government. They are now meeting at State House. I've just seen their pictures.
Yes. So beyond that, so involvement of people power at the very early stages of designing laws and policies. The next stage is mass awareness. Citizens do not understand the architecture of the state governance system. And I notice this each time I'm in policy meetings. There's a feeling by state bureaucrats, by public servants, that even when our activists are doing the protest and they're accusing government of this and this, they feel that there's no truth in what they're saying, because what they do on a day-to-day basis is not understood by the ordinary citizen. So then how do you check a government whose workings you do not understand? And that's where civil society comes in. We must invest in knowledge management so that our people know even the paper trail of tender processes, the paper trail of who approves what. When we notify the police that we want to protest over commodity price rise, who makes the decision? Are we holding accountable the right person, or are we holding accountable the scapegoat of the government? So investing in knowledge, but also understanding systemic mechanisms for holding government accountable. The very few that hold government accountable are usually civil society players that have access to resources, some of us that have got enablers such as these kind of platforms to hold government accountable. How do we ensure that the mechanisms that ensure that we can hold government accountable at all the substructures of government are understood by each and every person? The litigation, how do we ensure that the activist that is coming from a community, this activist that has no association with Haki, no association with Open Society Foundation, can still utilize and leverage on these mechanisms to make sure that we have an accountable system? I think that multi-layered approach will help us have an ideal situation for tackling the governance issues in Africa.
So we still have a lot of grounds to cover, because the issues of killings of young people who are raising their governance calls. But Happy, coming to you, you can use your, okay, comfortably, that is better for you. He talked about the question of consensus amongst the political elite, and it's practically happening here in our country. But then what happens when this regrouping of the political class at the expense of stability, at the expense of peace, at the expense of advancing the country forward, locks out the people who had elected a government? Because remember, the president, our president, in London before the elections at Chatham House, said the association between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga is a mongrel kind of a government. Now he's subscribing to the same, but in a different name called broad-based. So how does this regrouping of the political class then lock out, knee-jerk the public who are raising these concerns that, look, things are not working? I mean, is this regrouping somewhat dangerous for our democracy and our constitutional architecture?
Yeah. First, I want to appreciate Haki Africa for the invite, and it's a great pleasure to be a panelist. So I appreciate that. On your question, I think we face a serious challenge with the mongrel kind of leadership, the so-called broad-based, because it's coming at a time when, since Ruto Kasongo came to power, over 300 young people have been shot by police. 200 of them in a protest demanding for good governance. Then the solution, instead of listening to the young people, the solution is the old people come together, and now they say the country is united. And this is not only in Kenya. Remember, in East Africa, 3 opposition leaders are in jail. Uganda opposition leader is in prison, Tanzania opposition leader is in prison, and South Sudan opposition leader is in prison. All this in the name of power and in the name of stability. So the challenge we are facing right now is that the current leadership does not listen. And they don't listen to the people, they don't listen to the young people. And they have bought other tools that are there for accountability. Parliament is an accountability tool. That's why we elect people to go and represent us. But what has happened to our parliament? It has been bought. The opposition, which is there for counter-checking the government, it has been bought. Judiciary, you know the challenges that we are facing in judiciary. With the, first, there is no funding, enough money for judiciary, and there's a lot of interference. So you can see that everyone is trying to block the tools of accountability, and it becomes very difficult for people to, right now you might think there is peace in Kenya or in Africa, But there's no peace. People are just calm, thinking of, now what next do we do? What else do we do? Because we go to the streets, we are killed. We look for accountability institutions, they have been killed. So people are thinking of what next. And that is why people are even happy for countries like Burkina Faso. They are saying at least you find a way. Because how comes a country like Equatorial Guinea, the president has been there since 1979. So when will they, some people have never seen another president in that country. If I was in that country, maybe I could never known another president. Right here in Museveni, you can see he's old, he's tired, but he's going for another election in January, and he's going to win. So when there is no accountability, the people look for alternative, and the people must rise. And that is where the security questions comes in, because the government wants to retain power. So the question we must also ask in this conference is security for who? Because as human rights defenders, you are not safe. A journalist like you, are you safe in this country? Bloggers, are they safe? Lawyers. So when you're talking about security, is it security for me or the security for the elite? Thank you.
Okay, a round of applause for them. We'll come back to them. So there was that roving microphone, Shipeta, turn side here. Anyone with a view before I get back to them? By a show of hand. The gentleman in the maroon. Yeah. We have two, yeah, okay. You can use this one. Yeah. Yeah, you can use the microphone. Let it do. Still fine. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Your name, organization, and country.
My name is Collins from the Social Justice Centers working group. One is to thank panelists for the insightful contributions and for giving different perspectives into to the question. If I'm to pick from where Happy Lal left it, we need to begin thinking that, begin brainstorming around that we know the problem. We know that indeed there is tension between the issues of national security and human rights. But then we need to move further and ask ourselves, so what? And for me, I'm first drawn to the remarks by Haile Selassie in 1963 when addressing the UN, a General Assembly. He pointed to us that until basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all, the dream of lasting peace will remain, but completely
Put on your mic.
but never attained. And I think this is a question, this is a phenomenon that we are dealing with today. The theoretical understanding of having independent states was to address the issue we are tackling today. But over 50 years after independence of many African states, we still have this issue. My thinking therefore is, one is as human rights practitioners, we need to expand the space and not make this our responsibility. Who has the primary responsibility to address this dilemma? It is the people. Because governments borrow their authority from the people. So it should not just be our cause. We need to invoke the participation of academia, the participation of trade unions, the participation of different classes of social formations to be able to address this question. Because our governments are made of opportunists. Mamdani in one of his works, when victims become perpetrators.
Okay.
But I think for our case, you look at that, someone had said earlier that many people in leadership today were freedom fighters, were from the spaces that we occupy today. But the reality if you are to connect it with the works of Mamdani, is that these people were merely opportunists. They were not freedom fighters, they were not activists, they were opportunists. And if then we are dealing with opportunists, what need we to do to get ourselves out of this situation? So I'll be coming again, but I think to move towards a people-centered security system, we have to bring the people into this and the people in their diversity, and not just hold this space as human rights practitioners to imagine that we can overthrow this monopoly of state authority.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Kobler, I begin with you. It seems this is just but a highlight of how states trample upon the rights of their citizens at the expense of security. It's a two-way scenario. Both are needed. Human rights must be upheld. Countries must be stable and secure. But how do you draw that very thin line? And I'm sure Ghana is, as is Kenya, as is Zambia, and Nigeria, is experiencing similar challenges with that. But how do you balance?
Okay, so there is always a conflict between national security obligations, policies, and respect for human rights or upholding human rights. I think we have seen this vividly depicted itself in many scenarios in the African context, such that government or government of states only tend to look at what will benefit them, what they seek to earn, and not focusing on the people who give them such powers, to rule. In many cases, they are defending themselves, coming out with draconian rules or laws, all because they have an interest and they feel that if that interest at the end of the day is not achieved, then they are losers. For instance, I talk about getting votes, getting on power, ruling, because they want to see themselves ruling perpetually, continuous. They want to remain in power forever. They want to take power as what? Their bona fide property. And so because they are focused on at all costs, they tend to, make us suffer. They tend to make us suffer because they don't have us at heart. Excuse me to say. If they really have us at heart, they should be focusing on ensuring that people's rights are respected, protected, and fulfilled at all costs. Let's take election, for instance. They restrict civic freedoms. Challenges arise when national security policies, often justified to maintain peace and order, get restricted, get undermined. Okay, restriction of freedoms, civic freedoms, and that goes to undermine electoral integrity and leading to human rights violations that we see all the time. So what the picture I'm trying to paint is that, yes, there is a thin line, but that line must be, must be approached in a way that, fine, for them to also get what they want, they have to ensure that they focus on people. That is the reflection of the team towards a people-centered security framework. They may have security policies that give them justification why they do certain things that they do that affect us as people. But it's high time we are focusing on ensuring that whatever they are bringing on board, we are the beneficiaries. And when we benefit, that also goes to help them to achieve the thing. Because, mind you, if we are not alive, we are not doing well,
Yeah.
they cannot convince us that, yes, they needed our vote,
Okay.
therefore we should give them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okachukwu, I'm looking at your biography, and you are the coordinator of the Network on Police Reforms in Nigeria.
Well, I used to be the Executive Director of Rule of Law
And an Accountability Advocacy Center. Yeah, gotten it right. Are you concerned by the surge in the killings of young Africans, and killings because of calling for good governance, killings because of calling for an end to greed, corruption, nepotism, favoritism? And ideally, how should the response be when young people are telling old political elite and the oligarchy that you need to style up?
Okay, so let me draw your attention to the NSAS protest in Nigeria 2020. NSAS was a youth-led, movement protest against a notorious police unit called Special Anti-Robbery Squad, which was set up to combat, violent crimes. But this unit turned out to commit the same crimes that they were set up to address.
And we also had our own youth-led Thunderbolt,
Yes.
but against a greedy political class.
And this was in 2020. And remember that the response of the state was that the military were set to open fire on a crowd of young people who were armed only with their national flag. And hundreds were killed. The state denied, even though the judicial panel found that indeed people were killed.
And to ask you this, because I'll give you enough time to respond, does the Nigerian constitution allow the deployment of the military to handle civilian affairs, or was the consent of parliament sought?
So the internal security is the duty of the police. But because the state has refused to adequately fund the police are primarily incapable of dealing with internal security. So they resort to deploying the military. Today, as we speak, Nigeria's 36 states, there are special military operations across Nigeria. And what this has led to is gross human rights violations. So the military are not trained to deal with internal security. They are basically charged under the Constitution to deal with external aggression. But today, the military are the ones, and they were the ones that were sent to quell that peaceful NSAS protest. And what were they asking for? Disband this rogue unit, improve the welfare of the police, because poor welfare made them prone to corruption and violence. Good governance. The response was military violence, military brutality. 2 years ago, in 2024, following the protests in Kenya, there was another bad governance protest. It was the same pattern of state repression. The young people who were arrested, underage children who were arrested, were kept in police detention under inhuman conditions. Following public pressure, they were brought to court. While in court, they collapsed in court. That was what compelled the states to order their release. So you see that the response of the state has been repression rather than listening to the cries of the people for good governance. And I think that it throws up a challenge for, the answer will not be to give up.
Okay.
Of course, you know that our forebears fought colonial domination. It didn't come it wasn't a tea party, it wasn't given. It was a product of struggle, stubborn and consistent struggle. So I think we need to build a lot of civic consciousness.
Yeah.
We need to, create political awareness and support young people. And there's a disconnect between the old generation and the new generation. And I think we need to connect with them and let them understand the history of this story.
Yeah. Yes, Ruth, you have been taking notes. When you look across the continent, the Ghanaian, Nigerian, Kenyan, Zambian, there seems to be a thread that defines the commonality here, therein. But our police systems across the continent, after colonization, a continuity, but in the form of black colonialists. And was that system designed to fail? And if we are to reform the policing systems across the continent, how should that pathway be? For example, to just give you context here in Kenya, in the aftermath of the post-election violence, we had moved from a police force to a police service, established a police service commission to look at the welfare of the police. We formed an independent authority called Policing Oversight Authority that looks into the excesses. I mean, ideally still then we're grappling with challenges when it comes to high-handedness and violence. But how should that be reformed in the greater context of good governance and a service that works for the African people?
Thank you for that comprehensive question. And I'll start off, I'll take it from the latter end, where you visibly bring out that across Africa, policing really, or rather has too often been designed to protect the state from its citizens, just like you said, rather than to protect the citizens within the state. And that's where we want to see a mind shift or call for it, right? First of all, policing on the African continent must shift from being force-based to more service-based. And we've seen that police officers continue to see the protest demonstrations as battles to be won. But at the end of it, even when the bullets or the cartridges are left on the streets and there's blood spillage, right? And it then takes away from the same democratic expressions and rights that ought to be guaranteed, be it by our constitutions, right? That should be managed, of course, or accepted with a form of restraint and respect. And the second thing is that you speak of the independent policing oversight bodies that have been created, or even the complaint systems that are created. Equally, you have that in the Southern African region, but as well as in Zambia, right? And you do find that the policing systems are not people-centered very often. We do recruit police officers or law enforcement officers who are often the youth, the women, those that are excluded and marginalized. But we then turn the same people to be the people that then rebrand, like you said, in a black colonistic, we're the ones who are then causing the same oppression upon the citizens. But it gets me to a point, like you said, I was jotting down. Like I said earlier on, that repression thrives in isolation, but solidarity gives us power. Mr. Kapachiso kept on referring to people power. And what has happened on our African continent, in my thoughts, and I was thinking of what everyone is saying, is that I think what has overshadowed the progressiveness we should get to is in the name of sovereignty, and how democracy in Africa is perhaps one of the most contested spaces of our generation. And I think sovereignty will continue to be invoked as a shield against accountability, even for accountability stakeholders. I'm sure Jimmy there will be able to touch on that, right? Be it from the CSO angle, non-state actors. But you also find that while sovereignty is coming into place, security will continue to also be used as a justification for restricting the same freedoms that should be protected, right? And yet, without upholding human rights and without democracy, sovereignty, in my opinion, in itself, will be what makes us lose the legitimacy on the African continent. And to sum up, as I'm seeing you pick up your mind,
Yes, please.
I think the task before each and every one of us in this room is to insist that in Africa, sovereignty must then mean or translate into a form of responsibility. First of all, citizen responsibility, African citizenry, continental responsibility When we then refer to security, we must translate that into dignity of respecting even the basic person or the person that we see at the grassroots that doesn't even have a title. And when we speak of democracy lastly, inclusion is something we still keep preaching about, but perhaps we should then foster for better intergenerational coexistence on this issue of security, of human rights, of democracy, and governance.
Okay. Kapatiso, you have been taking your notes. Yes, please. I'm sure you must have been listening. Yeah, the gentleman there had pointed out a point, talking about intergenerational as well, and the question of leveraging on the minefield for Africa, which is its educated, tech-savvy, connected, urban young people who, because of lack of opportunities, are today making the perilous journey across the Mediterranean to seek better livelihoods in Europe, an aging continent that is tapping onto our resources, and had it not been for good governance, would otherwise have contributed to Africa's progress. So how do we now turn that table around?
It's quite a very difficult question to conclusively answer because it has many facets to it. There is, it's all in human rights, embedded in human rights, but not only civil and political rights, while we're talking about the governance matters, the cyber security and all that, the immigration laws, but also the economic rights perspective, where we're talking about the potential to thrive and succeed on the African continent. Africa is a gold mine. And we know it's a gold mine because we see many people coming to it to mine. And they mine the African potential, the labor resources, they mine the natural resources buried underneath our ground, and we see people coming to Africa to mine several things. But the question is, how do we leverage on what we have to turn it upside down so that it's the other way around, so that our African people can come to Africa and see this as a pod for success? And we're having a conversation just a few days ago with someone. We're saying there's an issue of incentives. When you go across Africa, from the economic rights perspective, from the trade law and investment perspective, you realize that there are particular incentive qualifications that are set so high that if you are a local citizen of a particular country, you will not be able to meet that incentive requirement. So ordinarily, the systemic circle is designed to exclude you. So what then happens is that if you cannot raise capital within Africa for you to thrive, and you know that you can beat your drums on the streets of New York and get some money, or that you can abandon your job here as a nurse in a hospital and go to an old people care home in the UK and get more money, you begin to measure the odds and cross. If you know that you cannot, as a youth here, establish a good social enterprise and thrive because you are not supported, if you establish a social enterprise and then you demand government to be held accountable, you are branded as a European funded organization, so then you then move to the other side. I think it's about how do we demand the creation of better system that actually present incentives for our local people. And we have, and for us in the civil society sector, we must begin to look at human rights not only from a civil and political rights perspective, but also from an economic rights perspective. Okay. Because the majority of us, the majority of our people that are going outside Africa, the brain drain and everything, are pursuing the realization of economic rights. And the realization of economic rights also thrive on political stability. So how do we ensure that we're able to marry the two and we're able to combine the two when we're having such kind of discourse, and so that when we're demanding the other, we are also demanding for that environment that allows us to thrive? How do we ensure that the cyber security laws and cyber crimes laws do not impede on this new innovation young people are bringing? They are selling online, they are making TikTok videos, they're doing online branding, and they're making more money. How do we ensure that these are not blocked under the gaze of security, under the gaze of maintaining some kind of environment that is very sensible and worthwhile for our governments?
Yeah, and Happy, We had seen also a similar attempt here in Kenya during the live broadcast of demonstrations in the first year to celebrate events of June last year. Attempts by the Communications Authority of Kenya to shut down TV stations and radios at the expense of national security. These excuses, which are flimsy, wouldn't be there, is it, if the governance system would be working and the reasons that had led the people to flood the streets would be addressed as service delivery, is it?
Yeah, if the government was working, they could have listened to the voices of the people last year when they said the finance bill, we are not comfortable with it because of the increase in taxes, yet we had increased taxes in 2023 finance bill. The government that listens. So they didn't listen, the people came out the street. Now they started controlling the streets. The number of police officers who were on the streets this year on 25th, the first anniversary, was so many. For those people who are in, there are people who are always on the streets, Francis, Auma, Gasheke, myself. The number of police officers that were on the street this year was so many, yet women were raped in the streets in this year's protest. So who are they protecting? Organizing a protest in Kenya is now a state event. The president is commenting, sending military. The governor is sending goons. The business people are sending security. Everyone is doing something. So it's becoming extremely difficult. And if there are three things that we must protect, one is the right to protest. Two, the right to vote. Three is the right to be. The right to be is the right to be alive. Because right now, people are being killed senselessly. Women have been suffering femicide issues. So the right to be, the right to human being is a challenge. And we have a state that has a primary responsibility to provide security. And they have the highest budget. Look at the budget lines. Security and defense has been given much more money, more than education and healthcare. Yet people in this country still feel very insecure. If you come from a slum area in this country, you must have your own security arrangement. People have just landed from the airport to here. They see Kenya is a very nice country, nice roads. Hey, you don't know. Come to Kibera, Mathare, Dandora, and now face the real issue. Security there is that the police that are there, they are there to kill young people so that they don't threaten the state. So the government in Africa or in Kenya or in East Africa, they don't listen. And that is why they have to look for all apparatus to take care of people who are protesting or people who have an alternative views. Blocking the media, making sure people don't get to work on protest days, making sure the public transport is not there. I know all of you are here on 25th and saw what happened. So do you call that security, the things that happened on 25th and on 7th July? Can we say now we have a proper security because they are able to stop protest on 7th July? Or is it a way to block people's voices? Is it a way to block the government ears from listening to the people? Okay. It is something that we must ask ourselves.
Okay, and because democracy also demands that we be fair and express our opinions, under the current financial year, which started in July, education is the highest with 703 billion Kenya shillings. So that is, and security comes at around number 560 after infrastructure, energy, education, and 3 more in between. But factual, that's just to fact check you. So, comments, observation? Yes, Uganda, use your mic. Any other? Yes, again, Zambia. I see the Zambians are very active. You guys were very active on the pitch as well yesterday. Only that it's football, so it goes either way. The Chipolo Polo. And what does Chipolo Polo mean? Bullets, eh? Okay. Another Zambian. Very proud of you guys. Okay, yes, please. Yes.
They're representing the South quite well. I'm called Hilda Achuro. I work with the Civic Advisory Hub. I'm from Uganda. I'm glad to know that, okay, your security is number 5 on the budget because ours is usually the highest. It takes the highest budget. It doesn't matter whether hospitals take the lowest and education takes the lowest, but security is always up there and you can't contest it. So I just have one point that I want to raise on both the migration of our African brothers and sisters out of the continent to look for better opportunities because of security, and then also merging it with the June strike this year and how the governments are not listening to people. I have one suggestion, I don't know whether it's a question. How best is AU empowered to support our governments? If this is a Pan-African conference, if African Union can be well empowered to give oversight and accountability to our governments, probably we would have some of these presidents and governments sit down to listen because then they're accountable to a higher party. And I bring this copying from the European Commission, European Union. It might not be perfect, but we've seen the war in Ukraine has taken forever to get done. Yeah. But you see them working on it. You see France getting in talks with Germany. You see countries trying to come up with a solution. And it's something that is lacking in African Union.
Okay.
Because if we had a stronger African Union, I believe that they would sit down our governments to talk about our security, to talk about the engagement that we have in our countries.
Okay. Thank you. Ruth, you respond to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll quickly respond to that. Basic privilege, not that I'm representing the AU, of course, I'm in those spaces. One clear distinction that I recently learned 2 weeks ago is when we do demand accountability from the African Union, we must begin to realize that what constitutes the union in itself is actually the
I am attending a function. I'll call you back.
4 member states, 55 member states. So it's actually the countries themselves. So when we speak about capacitating them or equipping the African Union, is it the Commission, the ones who are our civil servants employed at that higher level of decision making, or you're referring to the member states? Because that therein lies where the politics actually is of what you're talking about. And I'll give you a very practical example. This particular year, you saw that the African Union was trying to promote the Convention on Eliminating Violence Against Women and Girls. But some member states, because what constitutes that convention document infringes on the same rights that they infringe on, be it towards women or different sectors within their countries. They couldn't agree, or they had to remove certain clauses that may even protect. I know that in Kenya, in Uganda, you've been protesting, for example, against the violations of women within the country, right? Be it from the rapes that are happening, the abductions. But you find that it's very difficult to want to then empower a member state who is then willing to have that oversight done by them, because the issue of sovereignty then comes in. So it's an issue more at a member state level, and that's why you need the people power of the citizenry to actually, I don't want to say pressure, but to push and advocate for each of their member states, for the fact that they ascribe to the African Union, to commit to some of these progressive provisions. No. So that's just a distinction I wanted to make. You have to be very clear when you're making that call to action. Is it to the African Union Commission or to the African Union, which constitutes your country as well as taken my country.
Yeah.
Much to the commission, because I know our political leaders, then some of them don't support some of the things. And that's where the oversight comes in. Who else can caution them and sit with them? Yeah.
Yeah, you can take that. Chuka?
So let me also respond to this. And I want to, I mean, the keynote speaker made reference to Showore in Nigeria, who was, he had been arrested several times and charged with under the cyber crime, security laws, whether the counter-terrorism law act or the Cyber Security Act are usually misused by the state to suppress, dissent and to silence freedom of expression. Now, Showore has been arrested several times under these frivolous charges, and the courts have given orders for his release, and it's not just him. Now, the Nigerian state has persistently disregarded court orders. And so the Attorney General appeared before the National Assembly and they asked him, why are you disregarding court orders? And he said, national security is primarily over human rights. This was what the Attorney General of Nigeria said. And so a lot of court orders have been disregarded in Nigeria. And cases have been taken to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which indeed gave positive orders. But the Nigerian government has consistently disobeyed orders of the African Commission. So what do we do to strengthen these regional and sub-regional bodies to be able to hold state parties to account? I think that's the
Okay. Paul Richard, yes, the lady from Zambia. The final question, then as the IBC representative comes for his brief 10-minute remarks, then we go for lunch. We are still on good time. We have then one more delivery and a panel session that will now be open to all of us. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for bringing up this conversation. I think it's one that is quite timely, and in our context, we'll be going into an election year, so I think it's a conversation that has to be had. Speaking specifically in relation to police officers and their operations generally, I was having a conversation with one of a police officer who mentioned that some of the contributing factors when it comes to the officers being perpetrators of violence is that these people are trained differently for specific disciplines. So what does get to happen sometimes is that due to political interference, nepotism, and even personal reasons, they get to be mixed matched. So you will find someone who was specifically trained to see a civilian as an enemy being the one who gets to displace, let's say, a protest or something like that. So to them, their mandate is to end any scene of violence at all costs, whilst another person who was specifically trained to see a civilian as a human being is probably doing another task. And this, in my country, I think has contributed to the violation of human rights by and large. Judicial killings, really. And this has been reported by the Human Rights Commission from 2021 all the way up to 2023. Extrajudicial killings has been one of the things that they have reported on. But because the Human Rights Commission in my country does not have any quasi-judicial capabilities where they can conduct investigations and bring people and get to a conclusion, we have gotten to a point where their task only ends on researching, reporting, and then it just ends in dialogue and speaking to the police.
Okay.
So my question then to everyone who might have a possible solution is, what is the best practice that you've had in your country in relation to the Human Rights Commission and the police and seeing the linkage between human rights, the police, and really looking at these things?
Yeah, that was the final observation. Yes, you can respond to that because I'm done here. You know, I have a good dancer here. So before I invite my dancers, and you included, So utajibu hiyo swali, you respond to her. Yeah, the best practice.
Honestly, we have done many reports to Human Rights Commission, we have gone all over the world.
Here in Kenya?
Kenya.
Okay.
Ourselves, civil society, human rights organization. We have traveled the world giving reports everywhere. We have seen our people being abducted in Tanzania. We have done reports, we have gone to court, but it's not forthcoming to realize these human rights issues. A good example, I think we should not give up. A good example is Zambia. There's a lady, she was a police in charge of a copper belt. Recently, she was arrested and jailed for 3 years, though she was very powerful. But this gives us hope that, yeah, we may be in a regime, trying to protect the regime because it's got time. But I believe strongly, once the regime gone and things change, we'll be held accountable. Maybe at some point, if the Zambia can share with us that experience, I think it can give us hope. We should not now like, okay, we have been meeting, we have been doing these things, and we don't see really change. Nigeria, you say, AG said that content, it is very controlled. Nothing's changed. Kenya is the same. Kenya is the same. They say security comes first before human rights. But still, we need to speak up. We need to shout. We need to go for them. We need to make noise because we are the bosses. They are the servant. But I'd like Zambia to share the experience. The lady, she was jailed the other time, and this gives a big hope that it can be done.
Yeah, the Zambian experience, Muleta, briefly.
Yeah, so
you know the stomachs are empty.
So briefly, the Zambian experience is that it's taking opportunity of an all-state regime. So what happens is that once a particular regime has been kicked out, there is a Pandora box and there's a gap. There's now opportunity to prosecute those lieutenants of those particular regimes. It's a coward way of our systems doing it because then you are trying to touch people that have no political backing. But what happens is that those that are perpetrating the same thing in the current regime are then insulated. So that's how we navigate around it. But I also want to comment a bit on the AU issue. The AU issue and how it works is that, number one, we have an AU that is funded by GIZ, European Union, and all these things. How do you expect autocratic African leaders to even heed to its advice? So we have an entity that when people sit in their countries, they're away from the microphone, they say, this is a European agenda. GIZ is pushing for this at AU. See the jobs they advertise. AU-funded project, GIZ-funded project, and so people, the legitimacy of the institution is questionable in the eyes of the politicians who are the highest decision-making body. And so until we ensure that we can hold each other accountable, we can sanction each other within the African territory, and for as long as we're still borrowing and outsourcing accountability powers, our politicians will not respect such institutions. That's just a fact.
Thank you. Hardly do they respect. Much appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. It's so extensive topic that we can't exhaust it even in a day. But your contributions have been very, very valuable. Thank you for sharing the experiences from Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. And you're a good dancer. So, my guys, before I call onto the stage the IEBC, for some 5 minutes, let us stand up and refresh our minds. Yeah, that's very lovely. You can never get, there are 3 good dancers. You, come, and then come here. You can now get down. Thank you. Thank you. We'll do one more after lunch so that we run through everything. Allow me now to call onto the stage Mr. Crispin Owiye to talk about electoral integrity and peace initiatives in the continent. He's the Director of Legal Services at Kenya's Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC. Karibu, a round of applause for him. So there is only 10 minutes between you, us, and lunch.
Thank you very much, Ayub. Colleagues, I have been warned that it's only 10 minutes. I earlier on mentioned to Ayub that I wished to put the topic into context by sharing my experience at IEBC, and I told him that it would probably take between 4 to 5 hours for me to exhaust that experience, because it's been 13 good years at the election management body. I will try to summarize. Colleagues, when I looked at the program and I saw just before my name, it reads the big interview. So I asked my chairman, who deputed me to represent the commission here, what the big interview probably is about, and he said he did not know. So I will speak. And I asked myself, why the big interview? Looking at the theme of our meeting, national security obligations, intersection with human rights. And I said that probably somebody may have sneaked into my cables and unearthed something about me, my background, hence the choice for this presentation. I am an advocate of 28 years studentship as a law student, but as an advocate 22 years. And I'm also a human rights practitioner. Indeed, between the years 2003 and 2007, I worked largely in the human rights domain in a city called Kisumu. And thereafter, I became a politician, registered a political party called Vijana Progressive Alliance Party. Currently, the chairman of that party is a sitting member of parliament. It's called Anthony Kibagendi. For those who are in Kenya, who come from Kenya and who know him, I was the Secretary General. Still on that journey, I joined the security sector. After becoming a politician, I trained as a policeman. I'm sure that is surprising. Remember, I was already an advocate of about 4 years. Standing experience, I trained as a direct entry inspector of police. Went to Kenya Police Training College, Kiganjo, for 7 months. And I was instructed on security management, I was instructed on leadership, I was instructed on investigations. And I worked as a policeman in this country. I'll later on tell you something about police work. Then I became a public prosecutor. Prosecuted cases in court on behalf of the state for about a year. Then next I became a judicial officer. I was appointed a magistrate, and I served for 6 years. Up to those who are in Kenya, resident magistrate, senior resident magistrate, and principal magistrate. So I left the judiciary in the year 2013 when I was a principal magistrate, and I joined IEBC as the manager in charge of investigation and prosecution. During that time, the mandate of investigating election offenses resided with IEBC. So I superintended investigations and prosecution of election offenses all over the country. So I was directing the prosecutors on how to go about prosecution of election offenses. 2021, after 9 years as a manager, I became the director in charge of legal services at IEBC. Between 2013 and 2025, I have been the secretary of the statutory committee at IEBC that is responsible for enforcement of the Electoral Code of Conduct. This is the committee that summons politicians, candidates, and political parties who breach the code, who met out violence on their opponents, who intimidate, who harass. And believe you me, this committee has worked very, very hard. In the year 2017, it summoned 71 politicians and senior politicians, governors included, and meted out fines and realized fines of 15.3 million shillings from these politicians. The story of 2022 is not a good one because when the commission attempted to enforce the code, remember this code is at the center of election security management. When we summoned a politician called Honorable Sabina Chege, she proceeded to court and blocked the commission from prosecuting her for breach of the Electoral Code of Conduct. We litigated the matter. The High Court said, IEBC, you have no mandate to enforce the code. The Court of Appeal agreed with the High Court and said, you have no mandate to enforce the code, and we appealed to the Supreme Court and secured a victory that the IEBC has the constitutional mandate to enforce the Electoral Code of Conduct. And I want to promise you that this year we will enforce it with vigor. We will enforce it now that we have the thumb of approval from the Supreme Court of Kenya. Colleagues, I'm a public officer. And being a public officer in this country is not a joke. It is a highly regulated space. And many a times you ask yourself what to say and whether there will be ramifications or consequences of speaking in a certain manner. But for me, I'm already hardened. I will speak. So colleagues, elections, speaking about electoral integrity, I wish to say that in our country, my presentation will be a contextual presentation, narrowing down on Kenya. I want to request that you allow me, because it is one of sharing experiences in this country. So colleagues, the global constitutional imperative around elections is that elections will be conducted in a regular manner and that those elections will be democratic. In Kenya, Kenyans decided to put the election date, the general election date, in the Constitution so that there is no doubt, and it is the second Tuesday in the month of August in every 5th year. So we already know that the election date, general election date in 2027 is the 10th of August 2027, without a doubt. I know there has been some litigation around it, but there is already precedent set. One of the activists in this country went to court in the period before 2018, sorry, and there was a judgment of the High Court that the election date is certain, that it cannot be held earlier than the 5-year prescription. Elections issue is a human rights issue. And that is why in Kenya, Kenyans decided to expressly provide for political rights in our constitution. Under the Bill of Rights, we have an article, Article 38, that speaks to the right of Kenyan citizens to register as voters and the right of Kenyan citizens to contest in an election as a candidate. So it's a constitutional right, and that is good for our country. Elections revolve around sovereignty, colleagues. And that is why in Kenya, Kenyans again decided that their first article, the first article in the Constitution of Kenya, will speak to sovereignty of the people. And it says that all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya, and it shall be exercised only, the word only is expressed, only in accordance with this constitution. And that is why in Kenya, we insist that the voice of the people is the voice that must reign. So IEBC as a constitutional commission is also guided by certain provisions of our constitution. We have the leadership and integrity provisions. We've dedicated in Kenya a whole chapter to leadership and integrity. And the question that then follows is this chapter observed in this country? There are many of us, including myself, who say that it is observed more in breach. And we have had this experience. At IEBC, under my stewardship, we constituted what is called the Leadership and Integrity Committee of IEBC to scrutinize documents submitted to the commission by candidates, academic papers submitted, and to invite petitions from members of the public on candidates seeking to be elected as to whether they meet the leadership and integrity prescriptions of the Constitution. And somebody went to court, and the High Court decreed that IEBC has no constitutional mandate to enforce leadership and integrity provisions of the Constitution, and that the commission that has that mandate is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission of Kenya. We have appealed, we are at the Court of Appeal level, and we hope that we will triumph just the way we did for the Electoral Code of Conduct. Again, we have a whole chapter on representation of the people, and that is our chapter 7 of the Constitution of Kenya, which speaks to general principles of the electoral system. And it will excite you that Kenyans have prescribed that the elections must be free and fair. And Kenyans have gone ahead to list those conditionalities that meet the threshold of free and fair election. And they have said that it's an election that is free from violence, that is free from intimidation, threats, improper purpose, or corruption. And the question that comes to the fore is, do we have a corruption-free representative house? I've interacted with some members of parliament, and one of them being my member of parliament, and he has told me, and he has spoken about it openly, that our parliament is full of wash-wash. Wash-wash means those who sanitize corruption money. They wash it so that it looks clean, money laundering of sort. Those are his words. I know Kenyans who are here may agree with me that that is the true position. An election conducted by an independent body, IEBC, is established as a constitutional commission that ought to be independent. Now, in terms of independence, you need to have independence all round. The first independence must be in terms of finances. so that you have resources to manage your elections. And elections is not an event. It's a 5-year process. For the last 2 years, the Commission has not been facilitated with finances. And that therefore means for Kenyans that the Commission is behind in terms of certain key electoral processes and activities that it ought to undertake. Right now, we ought to have had a strategic plan and an election operation plan. But because of want of facilitation from the executive, we are where we are. We hope that that facilitation will come so that all preparations are in place for the 2027 elections. In this country, we have 2 instruments that speak to security in elections. We have the Election Offences Act and we have the Electoral Code of Conduct Enforcement Committee. Unfortunately, these legal instruments only apply during the election period. And the election period is just a few months to the election, so that when people commit election transgressions outside this period, then unfortunately enforcement cannot happen. I see Ayub is up. The staff at IEBC are Kenyans, and they are human beings, and we are speaking about human rights. Allow me to speak about human rights among the staff of the Commission. It has not been a walk in the park, gentlemen. These 13 years have been tough. We have no voice because we are public officers. There has been heavy profiling of staff of the Commission. And the most profound profiling was in the year 2017. I suffered that profiling. What happened is that the political formation simply selected senior management of IEBC staff as along tribal lines. So personally, I was put as a sympathizer of the then NASA. So that came from the letter authored by the Secretary General of Jubilee Party. The NASA side also authored a letter listing several names of staff and profiling them to belong to the other side. In the year 2022, there was again heavy profiling. Arbitrary arrests, intimidation, and injury. This was bad. In 2017, during a fresh presidential election, the returning officer of Kandara constituency was literally frog-marched by the then sitting MP, who is currently a cabinet secretary. For those of you who know Kandara. In 2021, we had staff of IEBC who were arrested and detained at the anti-terror police unit without an explanation as to the offenses that they committed. They were subsequently released. In the year 2021, there was a by-election in Juja, 2020, and the state descended on IEBC staff, led by the then governor of Kiambu. They attacked a polling station. They attempted to ballot staff. It was late in the day. They could not manage. They attacked us at the tallying center, Mangu High School. And half of those who were present in that tallying center were police officers. They just looked the other way while we were under intense attack. So it means we have not been spared either. And there is fear that 2027 may not be that rosy if Kenyans do not speak, if civil society does not speak. One other human rights transgression that the commission has suffered is death or the killing or the murder of IBC staff. In 2017, for instance, I lost my cousin, who was the manager in charge of ICT, and my namesake. And I'm reminded that today is the day he was buried. So I have a cousin who, upon realizing that I was coming to this function, made a post on Facebook and sent it to me about him. My cousin was called Chris Msando. You must have heard about him. So it's a long post. I know there's no time to read it. It's fairly long here, and it says it's exactly 8 years ago that our hearts broke in our village, Lifunga Kobiero, when Chris Msando was murdered. It's a long one. In 2022, the returning officer of Embakasi East constituency was also murdered. So those are human rights violations that the commission has suffered. Speaking about the police, because I've been one, professionalize that police force. When you get to Kiganjo, you are told in Swahili, wewe ni chombo ya serikali. You are a state tool. Trained on those old draconian syllabus. Force, not service, despite the fact that this country transitioned the practice, unfortunately it is not. So there is need to infuse human rights perspectives in that syllabus so that the policemen, the element that needs to be done, because policemen are human beings. The instructors at the Kenya Police Training because one of the things that happens is that they will tell you that whereas munatosombua, so they are not compensated very well. And then that means that the aggression that you see among the police, the aggression they perpetrate to civilians is actually transferred aggression. Right from things are changed at the college, then things will change on the ground. Colleagues, I can talk and talk and talk. It's high volume, but I want to leave it at that and promise that in the by-elections that we have, that we'll be holding on the 27th of November, the Commission commits to undertake an election that is free and fair and to work with stakeholders throughout the process. I want to invite the civil society to engage. As I speak here, I have missed a meeting in the office that the Commission Chairman is chairing, a meeting with the political parties liaison committee to engage and work together in the preparations towards the by-elections and ultimately in the preparations towards the general election. I thank you.
Asante, thank you so much, Bwana Crispin Owiye. A round of applause for him again. He has really granted us enough time to break for lunch. Thank you. He's the Director of Legal Services for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC. It's a new commission, but one of the institutional memory of the commission is when a director what gets given his remarks. Thank you so much. So we're just finishing up. So we are going for lunch, the main restaurant. So the good lady who's standing at the door will grant you the voucher so that you take one as you proceed. Then we meet here. It's now 1:30. By 2:20, we make a deal. 45 minutes, 50, that's enough. And we keep time. Because Shupeta and I may struggle to flush you out from the main restaurant. It's some distance away from here. So we meet here by 2:20 p.m. For those who are Muslims, there's a prayer room provided next door. You can observe your prayers there.